good afternoon and take us through the aftermath of Brian Kelly's biggest win today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me as always, Paul. I think, it's always kind of the fun thing in this job, right, is when a win kind of like changes the way you view the other 7 games and the other 5 games. And I think, this was a win that everything before just looked ugly, strained. Even the wins didn't look good. The losses looked worse. But they were kind of 5-2, and you didn't know what to make of them. And all of a sudden, you go out there and convincingly win a game like this, and Jaden Daniels is getting better as a passer each week, and just everything kind of seems like it's slowly looking like it's a fully formed picture. They win like this, and suddenly LSU is 6-2. They're back in the top 20, and they're in control of their own destiny in the SEC West, even though, probably don't expect them to win it. And I think, the crowd storming, for what that's probably just some drunk college kids being like, hey, this is fun, why not? I don't think anyone really is like, this is the biggest win ever. But at the same time, I do feel like a lot of the excitement of this win is just kind of in that feeling of it's going in the right direction, right? Like 8-4 is a perfectly good year this year. That's still probably the most likely scenario. But, it's about the fact that with a flawed roster, with all these things that looked so ugly a few weeks ago, they're getting better. And I think there's a lot of optimism that Brian Kelly's going to, have this in the right direction.
It just certainly feels that way, Brody. And I guess the even better news, you're off this, LSU is off this week, and then they get Alabama. And I know this means a lot more down there than maybe anywhere else, but they finally got the primetime night game for Alabama, and I know that will be talked about early and often.
Yes, it's true. No, it's been an entire discussion point this whole season that LSU hasn't been given night games this year. It was an 11 a.m. for the big game against Tennessee, 2:30 for Ole Miss, and it's just kind of been like, hey, how come LSU's a night game against Auburn? And I'm not saying I agree with that or don't, but it definitely is going to have some extra juice that we kind of haven't really gotten to see Tiger Stadium at night this year in a real way. And I know that can get eye rolls in a lot of places, but it is a different kind of thing. And just also there's an added element of this game hasn't mattered in a few years. I mean, this used to be the number one CBS primetime slot game for about a decade, and for the last 3 years, it just hasn't mattered. So even though, Bama's still probably going to be a double-digit favorite and probably should take care of business, it's more that this game's going to have some juice to it, and this game feels – even if they're an underdog, it feels within reach for LSU, and I think that's something for a fan base to cling on to.
And to me, it's so fascinating just to watch the paradigm shift on Brian Kelly. It was so easy to make fun of him. It was easy to poke holes at his accent and everything he was doing. And I heard over the weekend in Baton Rouge, and you live it, and you wrote about it today, all of a sudden now it looks like he really does know what he's doing.
Yeah, and I'll start with is I think the thing that is noticeable, right? This team isn't perfect, and we shouldn't jump too far to being like it's all fixed. Of course not. This team's probably still 2 years away from really challenging for what it hopes for. But what you can really take is the idea that every week that there's a problem, it seems like it gets addressed. And the things that were major issues in week 1 are actually improvements now in 8 games in. Jaden Daniels went from looking like the limitation to looking like, granted 2-week sample size, but looking like a really, really top-tier SEC quarterback. And that is what, you know as well as I, that sounds obvious, but not that many programs really are able to actually get better as years go on and fix problems week to week. I mean, what's the discussion point with A&M we're having right now? So I think that's really why there's this change. It's, we'll see how we recruit. That stuff will figure itself out. But right now, with the roster they have, and also a lot of their biggest key players are the transfers he brought in, are the freshmen he brought in. Those are the impact guys right now. So there's a lot of emphasis on, oh, wow, he can actually get a quarterback to improve. Oh, the O-line looked like a mess, and now they all of a sudden look like above average. I think that's where there's so much excitement.
You mentioned A&M, Brody, and certainly this time last year as the Ogeron train was running off the track, the Jimbo Fisher rumors were all over the place because of his connection to Scott Woodward, who just got an extension. It's just, I wonder what people are thinking now as the Jimbo Fisher odyssey at Texas A&M is just coming under massive attack.
Yeah, it is kind of funny to look back on the 2016 and 17 seasons when pretty much LSU was clamoring for Jimbo Fisher in 15 and then Tom Herman in 2016. Got neither, and Ed Orgeron didn't work out, but they don't really want anything to do with either of those other two coaches right now. So it's just kind of fascinating. And the Jimbo thing is just, it's so strange because I think what leaves most of us shocked, right? I'm curious where you stand, is the infrastructure looks so good. And in a lot of ways, that is the head coach's job. It looks like a roster that should be competing for things. And just I mean, it's no secret to anyone here, the offense is broken and outdated. And that's something that has been lurking in the background for years now. It was never quite the forefront. All of a sudden now it is the discussion. And even if they don't have leverage to fire him anytime soon, what does that do to recruiting? What does that do to, hey, you haven't really developed a receiver for the pros well in a long time. Are you going to get the next Evan Stewart? Things like that. That's where it gets so fascinating. And that is where, that is a big win for LSU. And it is kind of fascinating to see, I don't know, how we truly don't know anything when it comes to coaching cycles.
Yeah, and you mentioned the recruiting, and I realize LSU recruits regionally and also nationally, but traditionally it's recruited heavily in Texas, and I'm wondering just what you pick up on the recruiting trail, and it's still early to figure out, even though the recruiting date is under 2 months, but you have to wonder, and what do you hear after looking into it or hearing about Jimbo Fisher and recruiting in spite of everything that happened last year when he had the best recruiting class we've ever seen?
Yeah, exactly. I do think there's a bit of momentum going away from him. I do think there is I don't think people are just going to suddenly bail, but there is a bit of an apprehension about okay, this the move.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.